Um, I would like to thank you for all, the labor put to prepare this occasion, and thank you for your time. So, in summer, the heat in Adana, Turkey, with a felt air temperature can reach up to 52 Celsius degrees. Those who can afford to go to the seaside or highlands can also escape disastrous weather effects. While staying in the city center, the rest must find other ways, such as using air conditioners or finding places where they can take shelter from the scorching heat. In this context, I focus on gendered relationships with urban water spaces in the city of Adana around the Seyhan River, which is part of my MA thesis based on 17 semi-structured interviews, including 6 women. What conditions were in place for people to live in this way in Adana? As Chris Christian indicates, in the unsettled plain, the modern Çukurova, the region where Adana is, has emerged through sedentarization and settlement projects of the late Ottoman state. This prevented the locals from following their strategies to escape summer heat and malaria, meaning to leave the lowlands seasonally. Agricultural infrastructures have such a background. As the authors in Field Guide to Patchy Anthropocene do, I adopt also a materiality-based approach to infrastructures, and I don't necessarily investigate how water is delivered to prospective users in line with the design function. Also, Sultana conveys how gender is negotiated pertaining to bodies and environments and proposes the emotional political ecology to show how joy and relief are juxtaposed with the fear and despair in the context of accessing and using safe water. She demonstrates how gender matters in extreme events such as floods and resilience generated in response to them. I examined gendered relationships with not water as a resource but with water environments composed of canals, regulatory bridge, the Seyhan River, and so on. And yeah, there is an embankment wall and irrigation canal here. So I examine who becomes oriented toward water in which ways while the sun is up. I use orientation in the sense that Sarah Medusa's being oriented is about how to find our way in conjunction with coming to feel at home. I will mention the riverside and canal side in such a context. The division I make between zones of the river and irrigation canal is not based on dualism between so-called nature versus human-made. The infrastructural constructions and other ecological bodies have co-constituted the urban fabric. The highlights I made are based on forms of water manifested through, such as the river bank with its ambiguous borders between land and water, and the irrigation canals with high voluminous flowing bodies of water. My endeavor is to trace different experiences which can be said to be place-based, showing how there is no universal story of a water environment within the same neighborhood. Firstly, I will present how generative relationships are built with water environments in urban heat and how these engagements are gendered. Secondly, I want to convey how different forms of water environments are relevant to gendered relationships. Lastly, I want to raise a question about how to approach pleasure and risk in climate context from a feminist and queer perspectives. So there are 2 main engagements with the infrastructural environment outside the design. One is bathing in the irrigation canals and the other is doing laundry in front of regulatory bridge. I will use the term bathing to refer to this local practice as it encompasses various expressions used by the locals who do not exclusively refer to it as swimming, who enters the irrigation canals. It is predominantly boys and men from lower income backgrounds. One of my interlocutors, Yilmaz, a 61-year-old man who has undergone drowning but continued bathing in the canal in his youth, talks about how certain masculinities are shown in canal bathing. You have no other way to cool off. You have to learn because you are a boy. You have older brothers. We will tell you anyway, jump in. We will save you. That's the culture. Everyone, almost all growing up in Adana, learn it. He further indicates these young boys like showing themselves. It's about proving themselves, showing off. They especially perform, they put on a show because they are confident in themselves. In the neighborhood, many women say that they don't know how to swim. When I asked why women do not bathe in the canals, Seher, a 32-year-old woman who was among the few who knew how to swim in the pool or at the sea said that, "How many times does a fish try to escape from an aquarium? Why can't you show your courage as a woman? If my brothers did it, I would want to try it too. And they would tell me no, and I wouldn't understand why." Seda, another woman whom the others call like a man, as she narrates to me, speaks of her brothers as supportive regarding bathing in the irrigation canals. She was the only woman who could experience entering the canal I could talk to, which corresponded with her non-conforming gender manifestation. However, she didn't continue to bath in the canal as boys did. In fact, she doesn't claim swimming knowledge in general as other bathers do. "I cannot swim. I was always saying to myself, I don't know how to swim. You will drown if you fall in the irrigation canal because I have a certain limit. I can't exceed that limit. If I do, I'll drown." Her practical sense of swimming is not the same as her brothers. Drawing on Bourdieu, the feel for the game, generated by the experience of the game, navigates the orientations, expectations, investment, thoughts, and actions. Therefore, it creates a subjective sense. Louis MacNay mentions this practical sense as a form of knowledge that is acquired through bodily experiences. Seda does not seem to relate to this knowledge as an ordinary one as others do. However, she could surface this practical sense when she jumped into the canal to save her nephew from drowning. Her nephew's aunt stated, "If it were me, I wouldn't be able to jump. How did you dare?" The past experience in the canal could make her move for a rescue act in the state of emergency. Seda notes, "I'm glad my brothers got me into the canal back then. If they hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to save a life." Not claiming swimming knowledge seems to align with the dispositions of gendered order in which women are not imagined and recreated as swimmer subjects of water spaces. Nevertheless, her case indicates how dispositions are neither mechanical nor limitless. Unlike many women, she could bath in the irrigation canals and have a practical sense to some extent, which could be done with the help of her masculinized existence, involving the presence of brothers and the ways she embodies her identity. The non-canal bather position can show how cooling off in the canals entails certain community, proximity, and knowledge, which are not static. These constitute both capacity and sociocultural position in relation to watery contact. Furthermore, displaying the body and circulation of certain feelings is significant in the relationship with the water environments in this context. Women, at the same time, embody the caregiver position, which posits further different affective relationships with irrigation canals. Emel, as the eldest sister of her family, says that it was hard to keep the children at home. They were going to water. We were afraid that the children would die. My mother was always after the children. It was really hard to raise a child between two waters. Living between two waters had generated a risk zone for boys, creating another dimension for looking after children. As the eldest sister, the assistant to the mother, she was both the non-canal bather and the caregiver. Women are not in a situation of zero connection with the water environments. They converted the floodgates into a place to do laundry. They call it çamaşırlık, which refers to laundry washing area in Turkish. And like canal bathing, women have a prolific engagement with the water environment beyond design. They tailored the water environment, stretching the domestic work outside the homes. Seda tells about how enjoyable it was. As soon as summer came, everyone would take their kilts apart. They'll leave them in the sun, they dip them in the water and pull them out. It was really enjoyable. It was a lot of fun. We're going to water, dip our feet in and stuff. We would get wet, fall and slide on the rocks. For some, the heyday of çamaşırlık was before construction of the embankment wall. In 1990s, a concrete structure constructed in place of the riverbank. As locals call it, the river was contained inward and became like a canal. Before embankment wall, the riverbank was a shallow graduational zone where land and water intermingled. This form allowed women to gather to do collective laundry and immerse their bodies. A man points out withdrawal. Nobody goes down there because it was surrounded by concrete. This situation further underscores how forms of water environments can be significant for gender dynamics in general. A man states that when the neighbors would get hot in the heat, they would go into the river with their shalwar and tops. They would cool off there, take a good swim. So it was for cooling off. This was before the evening, before the fathers come home from work. When the riverside becomes more canalized through enclosure with a concrete wall, the topographical form lost its gradual and ambiguous feature. Sultana mentions how water management states belong to the local social lives, especially in terms of gendered social order. Similarly, we see that urban planning giving shape to the water environments makes it more like a canal which has gendered consequences. Overall, I tried to show how water environments can be a space of refuge in the extreme urban heat. However, there is no universal and fixed act of cooling off. In fact, material changes and gender order shape experiences with water environments, such as feelings and practices. On the one hand, the riverside and canal side present how generative engagements happen in gendered ways, such as canal bathing and doing laundry outside. On the other hand, forms of water environments are significant, pertaining to gendered relationships. The voluminous water flow in canal brings both joy and fear and risk of drowning and relief from the scorching heat together. The shallow and diffused form of land and water in the riverside affect the practices of women, such as assembling within a water space, cooling off in the heat stress, so reducing the cost of washing and meeting people basically. So, as in the case of irrigation canals, women become less proximate when the riverside gets closer to the canal form. Distance to the canal is both material and social, which is interwoven with the affective form of orientations. I contend that non-canal bather and caregiver bodies are illustrative of how social lives around water environments are gendered and how forms of water matter in daily life. From feminist and queer perspectives, I still wonder, in context of environmental justice, how we can further think about distance from an activity like entering the canal in extreme heat, in which pleasure, risk, and relief are intertwined. So, how can we further approach water engagements in the context of extreme heat, where pleasure, risk, and relief or resilience are intertwined from feminist and queer perspectives? Thank you for listening.